Welcome to my governor prediction. So let's start. And there we go. So let's start for Colorado. So in Colorado, Jared Polis. I think Jared would do pretty well in the midterms. He's probably gonna win by a likely margin. I wouldn't be surprised if he wins by a safe margin, but it's probably gonna be a big, decent red wave. So likely. Up next, you know what? Let's do Illinois. So Illinois, I think that even with J.B. Pritzker, I think the red wave will be a bit of a difficult one, but not too much. I think it would only drop down, and it's a likely one. So up next for Florida. So I think this should be a pretty easy win for Ron DeSantis if you look at the nominees for the Democrats. Yeah, there we go. So the nominees for the Democrats, they're not that good. For the main one probably is Charlie Crist, the best one. If you nominate Nikki Fried, you're going to lose by a big margin. I'm just gonna look at the polls just for fun, even though they really don't mean anything. Yeah, not much, but I think either way, no matter who is the nominee, I see Ron DeSantis winning here by around anywhere from 5 to even like 9%, maybe even 10 if it's Nikki Fried. Up next, let's talk about Ohio. So here's Ohio. So as many of you know, Mike DeWine is trying to run for re-election, so he's probably going to be the nominee. And against the Democrats, there's really not that much. His two former mayors, and I think this is going to be either likely or safe. I think it's just going to miss the safe categorization by the GOP, but I still see him winning here by a likely margin. So let's go to Massachusetts. So yeah, there we go. So Massachusetts. So as many of you know, the Republican, or I should say the incumbent governor of the state of Massachusetts is not going to run. He's a Republican, but a liberal one because it's Massachusetts, of course. And the Republican primary, it's a deal which is more Trumpy, so it's not going to work in Massachusetts, of course. And I'm kind of interested to see the polls for this, which I do agree if he is the nominee, he's going to lose. It's Massachusetts, so I see the Democrats winning here by a likely margin. It could be safe or lean, depends on the candidate, but if it's deal, it's going to be a likely margin, probably. Briefly for Rhode Island, I think that there wouldn't be too much of a difference this election year. I think it, drops down to likely. I don't see too much happening in this state, in all honesty. Well, for Connecticut, it's more interesting. So, yeah, let's go to Connecticut. So, if you know, back in 2016, or I should say 2018, it was one of those races like similar to New Jersey that it was weirdly really close, and the Democrats barely won in a blue wave year. So, I think it's going to be the same nomination, but by both parties. I just don't see Ned Lamont losing too much popularity, which is why it's kind of difficult to think what would happen, because I think it could drop down to lean. I would not be surprised if that happens, but I think that's just skipping the gun a bit too much, and I think the most likely at the moment it's likely category. So yeah, let's go up next. So let's go to Texas. So Texas. So as many of you know, Greg Abbott is the governor, but there's a Republican primary between him and really Allen West. I'm not sure who's going to win. I think it's going to be Greg Abbott, but at the same time, Allen West does have a lot of momentum. So, well, for the Democrats, it's going to be Beto O'Rourke. I just don't see him doing too well because of his stance with the gun issues, and no matter who's the nominee, I see the Republicans winning here by a likely margin, at least. For Kansas, so Kansas, if you don't know, Kansas actually does have a Democratic governor, Laura Kelly, so which is one of the most endangered Democrats in 2022, because Kansas is one of those states that is really red, at least for now, but I think it's going to be red for a while. So Laura Kelly is going to be probably against someone like Derek Schmidt. And let's just look at the polls. Yeah, So as you can see, extremely difficult race for her to win here, and I see the GOP easily, flipping the governorship in this state quite easily because of the red wave and the approval rating that Biden has is probably going to lose her a lot of votes. So for the last likely state, for Alaska, yeah, there we go. So Alaska is one of those races that's interesting because no incumbent has won re-election that is Republican since like 1978. So the Republican nominees, of course, is Mike Dunleavy, the incumbent governor who's trying to seek re-election, while for the Democrats, yeah, it's Mark Begich. I think Mark will be a decent nominee by the Democrats. A former governor is always going to do numbers on the races. So, because of the system in this state, Mike Dunleavy only has to run a decent campaign. Yeah, those polls weren't that good, and I only see this state, being a likely state due to the voting system, and I think it's really going to be an easy win for his re-election since it's going to be a red wave. So, and yeah, I think that's. Oh wait, let's go to Oregon. So Oregon, it's one of those interesting, states because if you don't know much, Kate Brown, she can run for re-election, of course, but she's really infamous, hated by a lot of people on the right or center right because of some businesses and lockdowns and stuff. But for the Democrat primary, since she can't run, it's probably going to be either Tina Kotek or Tobias Reed. While for the GOP, I do wonder who the GOP will nominate, so no big names, but for the primary, so, oh god, that's a lot of undecided voters. I want to see what the, polls, not much, pretty useless, as usual, yeah. And now for Oregon, I think it's going to be likely. I would not be surprised though if it's one of those states like New Jersey in 2021 that was expected to be easily a likely state but could drop to a lean. But as of now, I just don't see a decent Republican candidates, and gonna leave it as likely for now. For another Democratic governor, for let's go to Minnesota. For Minnesota, it has Tim Walz, who's trying to seek a second term. For the Republican primary, there's some state senators, but no one big. For the predictions, says lean, solid, likely. I think due to the red wave, probably going to affect everything nationally. I think it drops down to only barely a lean, and that's it, probably like 3 or 4%, but not much. For the United States, so let's go to Arizona. So Arizona, as many of you know, Doug Ducey is now going to be able to run for a third term, and let's go to the Republican primaries. So the main one is, I think at the moment, it's Kari Lake. I've seen her get a lot of attention in the media. I mean, of course. While for the Democrats, the Democrat primary, sorry about that. Democrats, it's Katie Hobbs probably, yeah. And Matt Salmon as well for the GOP, but still a lot of undecided voters. And I think that Trump will probably go for Kari Lake. So for the polls, I want to see that. What's it talking about? Yeah, right here. It says Tuz up, but I think if the GOP nominates Kari Lake or someone else against someone like Katie Hobbs, I think it should be a lean state. Bear in mind, this is Arizona, the Arizona GOP, so this could easily go sideways, but as of now, a lean margin. And now let's go to for Wisconsin. So Wisconsin, as many of you know, there's a incumbent Democrat, Tony Evers, as the Democratic incumbent in Wisconsin, and he will try to seek re-election for the Republican primary. There's not that many noteworthy, I should say, like big names, but like it's a red wave, so it's going to be an easy pickup for the GOP in my opinion. I do think it's going to be. The Trump endorsed candidate's probably gonna just win here. There's the lieutenant governor, former, so she's probably gonna do well. And even with the incumbency, man, like Wisconsin's just trending to the right, and it's going to be a big problem for Tony Evers. And I see this state being a lean state for now. And yeah, Pennsylvania. Yeah, let's go to Pennsylvania. So I think is one of the hardest ones for me to pick, since it could easily be a tilt or lean. Maybe for both sides if like the GOP nominates someone bad, but as many of you know, Tom Wolf is term limited, and Josh Shapiro, his attorney general, will try to run and win, but yeah, it's Josh Shapiro for the Democrats, while for the GOP, there's so many candidates. Lou Barletta, Doug Mastriano, Max Swain, all of these names, Riggenball. So I want to see Luke Barletta, Mastriano. I think is one of those races I really can't make an exact prediction. I think that some of these candidates by the GOP are not the greatest. I think they're a bit too Trumpy, but because it's going to be a red wave, they're probably going to win. I think it could easily be either a lean state or a lean governor for the GOP in this state, but if they go for a guy that's like, like that was a hardcore Trump supporter through and through, it's going to probably be a tilt state, but still, they're going to win here because it's going to be a red wave, of course. And now for, let's go to Maine. So Maine, for Maine. So as many of you know, incumbent Governor Janet Mills, Democrats trying to run for re-election, and the Republican primary, it's going to be Paul LePage, who's the former governor of the state. So, just why I do think it's going to be extremely close. And I would not be surprised if it's tilt hard, but I think Mills barely wins here by a tilt margin. Well, let's go to Michigan. So let's go to Michigan. So many of you know this state, and because of Gretchen Whitmer, and I think she's going to, of course, try to run for a second term. And for the Republican primary, if it's James Craig, I think he's the only one that can go against Whitmer and give her a decent fight. Even though that it's going to be a really close race, I think James Craig could barely. I'm not sure, but Gretchen Whitmer. I think the Republicans will probably gonna put a lot of money in this state, and I think that, as I was saying, if it's James Craig, I think that the red wave propels him to win here by a tilt margin, of course. But if it's any other candidates, I see Gretchen Whitmer winning here by a not lean, but like tilt. But as of now, I think James Craig wins. So for we only have 3 more states for Nevada. So Nevada. So one of those states I'm really looking forward to. So Sisolak, the governor, Democrats trying to run for re-election, and for the Republican primary, the main one is Joe Lombardo, and I think that it's a toss-up, and I do believe, so Joe Lombardo, if he's the nominee, and the red wave is probably gonna be pretty big for him and the nation, he wins here by a tilt margin. For New Mexico, I'm gonna leave Georgia last. So New Mexico, another state that is quite interesting. Probably one of the ones in the governor, especially that I'm most looking forward to. So Michelle Lujan Grisham is trying to run for re-election as a Democrat nominee, while for the GOP there's only one, Mark Ronchetti, who, if you don't know, he really did well back in 2020, and many were surprised by how much he did better than Trump in this state. I think, as I was saying, so for most elections, this state would be a likely state. But because it's going to be a red wave, it would probably drop down to lean. But it's really mostly because of how good of a candidate Ronchetti is for this state, in my opinion. And I think he actually is able to make a decent fight to make a tilt state for the Democrats. I barely don't see him winning yet. Do you think the Democrats will probably barely win this state? But if the GOP puts a lot of money in New Mexico, I would not be surprised if the Republicans, with a red wave, win here. And I think Ronchetti is a really good candidate for this state. And lastly, for Georgia, so a lot of you want me to, say what I think in this state. I think it's going to be, It's either going to be Brian Kemp or David Perdue. We don't know if it's going to be a harsh primary, but like already can see David Perdue is already trying to overtake Brian Kemp, and I think a lot could happen. If Trump endorses Perdue, he probably wins. Well, for the Democrats, Stacey Abrams, of course. I do think that she's running not because she thinks she can win in 2022, but I think she is running because of the fact that with her help, she might be able to propel Warnock, the senator in Georgia, to win, which I do think is more likely that Georgia stays blue in the Senate level, but Stacey Abrams, because of the red wave and discontent against Biden, she barely loses here by a tilt margin. And yeah, this was my governor prediction updated, so Republicans 31 against the Democrats 19. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. Stay tuned for the next video.